Welcome to the Melrose Unitarian Universalist Church. Our service today is called Healing Our Relationship with Mother Earth. Good morning. I'm David Bliss and my pronouns are he, him. In this time of pandemic isolation, we believe a relationship with our Mother Earth is a personal act and can be a form of everyday worship. Sharing our love of nature is an act of love as we gather in this way online for worship. Our church strives to be a spiritual community for our time, honoring diverse theological perspectives and remembering that issues of justice and equity shape all that we do. As we build together a community of caring, courage, and hope, we welcome your whole self into our worship. Helping with our worship today is Tech Master Josh Miller, and today's host for the chat box is Florence Cordovana. Feel free to say hello to her and each other in our chat box today. Florence, if you will, please share a link in the chat box now to the welcome page for our website, where folks can learn more about us and to sign our digital guest book. Please all do feel welcome to stay afterward for our online virtual coffee hour. I have several announcements to share. This week we are celebrating Earth Day on Thursday, April 22nd. Beginning that day and continuing through the following week, the City of Melrose has organized a series of community events for all ages. To learn more, please see the link that Florence will also share in the chat box. There will be a finance forum next Sunday, April 25th at noon, following the service, and breakout rooms on the same Zoom link. At the forum, our treasurer will review where we are with this year's budget and what the fiscal year 22 proposed budget looks like now that the pledge drive has concluded. Also next Sunday, on April 25th, is the second installment of Opening Doors, a music and interview series discussing issues related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, hosted by Alistair MUUC and presented in collaboration with our anti-racism team. Alistair's guests for this session are Dan and Claudia Zanes, featuring the Grammy award-winning children's performer Dan Zanes and Haitian American music therapist and talented jazz vocalist Claudia Zanes, who have been making beautiful music with each other since the day they met in the fall of 2016. Last announcement, the choir is looking to add some new members, especially anyone who can sing tenor or bass. Rehearsals are on Zoom from 7:30 to 8:45 on Wednesday evening and offer a fun, interactive way to hang out with MUUC friends, as well as produce music for Sunday morning worship. Talk to a choir member or check out the midweek update for more information. Now's the time we greet each other. Please switch to the gallery view to scroll through and wave hello.
Good morning. Many of the words in today's service come from Robin Wall Kimmerer. Robin is a mother, scientist, distinguished writer, and decorated professor. She is an enrolled member of the Citizens of Potawatomi Nation. Robin is the author of Braiding Sweetgrass, Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Telling of Plants. As a writer and a scientist, her interests in restoration include not only restoration of ecological communities, but restoration of our relationships to land. She lives in an old farm in upstate New York, tending gardens both cultivated and wild. I call us to worship this today with words from Robin Wall Kimmerer. We say that humans have the least experience with how to live and thus the most to learn. We must look to our teachers among the other species for guidance. Their wisdom is apparent in the way that they live. They teach us by example. They've been on earth far longer than we have been and have had time to figure things out. Lighting our chalice this morning is Green Sanctuary member Gretchen Locke.
Good morning, everyone. Now, along with UUs everywhere, we light this symbol of our faith, the flaming chalice. As we light this chalice, we recognize the indigenous people of the Massachusetts tribe, on whose land our church building stands. This morning, our chalice lighting reading is called Like the First Hint of Green by Jennifer McLaughlin. As the first hint of green begins to peek through the barren ground, and as that little sprig grows into a healthy stem, and as that stem grows into a stalk and forms a bud, as that bud slowly opens with each new day to form a yellow daffodil, let us be like that first hint of green, renewed by the warmth of the sun's rays, and ready to emerge with a new energy, ready to face the day. We light this chalice to bring a glimmer of that warmth into our space. And now our music director, Tara Tresner-Kirsch, will introduce our opening hymn. Josh, please spotlight Tara.
Good morning. Our opening hymn is by elder song leader Lawrence Cole. It was from him whom I first heard of Robin Wall Kimmerer's book, Braiding Sweetgrass, as his music is highly influenced by her work. It's a chant and it comes in layers. So I invite you to sing any layer of the chant, but the one that goes throughout, which you can just keep doing, goes like this. Humbly we walk here, humbly we sing here, humbly we bless this ground. Please join me in singing Humbly by Lawrence Cole.
Humbly we walk here, humbly we sing here, humbly we bless this ground. Humbly we walk here, humbly we sing here, humbly we bless this ground. Humbly we walk here, humbly we sing here, humbly we bless this ground.
Now let us join together in the words of this covenant, followed by the song of aspiration. Love is a doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. This is our great covenant, one with another and with our God. Now is the time for our story. Gather around your devices. Today's story is from Robin Wall Kimmerer. She writes and speaks a lot from the teachings of her people, especially about how the existence of our world, the people and the animals, and also the land, air, and water, depend on what she calls a covenant of reciprocity. It's a very big concept. What do you think it means? We use the word covenant in our church. It means a promise. Reciprocity is a caring for each other. You care for me and I in return care for you. But Robin means not just reciprocity between people, she also means looking and listening and being respectful of all beings and being grateful for the gifts that the world shares with us so that we all benefit. In this short video, Robin talks about the honorable harvest. It's a story about this covenant of reciprocity. Josh, please play the video.
If I could choose just a single element of the traditional teachings that we're called to pick up, it would be the teachings of the honorable harvest, which were taught us by the plants, who give us everything that we need. It's a covenant of reciprocity between humans and the living world, a very sophisticated ethical protocol. One of the first steps of the honorable harvest is to understand that the lives that we are taking are the lives of generous beings, of sovereign beings. And in order to accept their gift, we owe them at least our attention. To care for them, we must know what they need. And at the very minimum, we should know their names. And yet, the average American can name over 100 corporate logos and 10 plants. Is it a surprise that we have accepted a political system that grants personhood to corporations and no status at all for wild rice and redwoods? The protocols for the honorable harvest are not really written down, but if they were, it would look something like this. When you get to the woods, you don't just start grabbing everything in sight. We're taught never to take the first plant that you see, and that means you'll never take the last. This is a prescription with inherent conservation value. And then if we encounter another plant, we ask permission. I've always been taught to address that plant, to introduce myself and tell it what it is that I have come for. If you're going to take a life, you have to be personally accountable for it. I know there are places where if you talk to a plant, they think you are crazy, but in our way, it's just good manners. If you're going to ask, you have to listen for the answer. You can listen in different ways, pragmatically, intuitively. Look around, see whether those plants have enough to share. And if the answer is no, you go home. For we remember that they don't belong to us. And taking without permission is also known as stealing. And the Honorable Harvest counsels that we also take in such a way that does the least harm and in a way that benefits the growth of the plant. Use everything that you take. It's disrespectful of the life that's given to waste it. The next tenet of the honorable harvest is to share it with others, human and non. The earth has shared generously with us, so we have to model that behavior in return. And a culture of sharing, we know, is a culture of resilience. Plant gatherers often leave a spiritual gift behind, but it can also be a material gift. Weeding, caretaking, spreading seeds, helping those plants to flourish. We give songs, we give ceremony, we give our respect, we give fertilizer. Every breath that you take is a breath that was made for you by plants. On the water that you drink, whether you're in an urban setting, whether you're on a remote mountaintop, we still are recipients of those gifts. And if we take the time to be grateful, that brings us into that state of humility, of understanding that we are not at the top of a biological hierarchy, that in fact we are the younger brothers of creation.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mary Delahanty. Every week, we take time in our service to center ourselves, to breathe deeply, and to remember our highest ideals and deepest convictions. I invite you now into a time of prayer and meditation. First, we'll join together in our centering song, which is related to our monthly theme. For April, our theme is becoming, and our song for April is also called Becoming. Then we sit together for a few minutes in shared silence. After that, we share with each other our joys and sorrows, and then we close with a prayer. Please now settle into your chair for our centering song. After our song, we'll go directly into 2 minutes of silence. Josh, would you please share the centering song video?
I am who I'm becoming. I am what I have done. I am what I am dreaming. I've only just begun. I am what
Every week we share a ritual when we speak of our personal milestones of our lives, our joys and our sorrows, so that we may know each other more deeply and help one another more gently to better live out our commitment to this beloved community. First, I ask you, if you have a sorrow to share today, please type it into the chat box and I will read them aloud. A candle of sorrow from Cheryl, that Chris's mom is not doing well and we might be saying goodbye to her sooner than we would like. A candle from Dan Franklin, a candle of sorrow, of concern for Mary Beth. Her recent MRI showed that her tumor has grown slightly. She is resuming treatment and we hope for the best. Yes, we do. A candle of concern from Beth Yergrow. For Dominic Thomas, a former member of this church, he is having surgery on his knee for multiple torn ligaments at the end of the month. A candle for Reverend Suzanne Interrogator. I'm heartbroken about Dante Rice and Adam Toledo. I'll give it another moment. It takes a little while sometimes to type. I believe that's it. Florence, please let me know if I miss anything. Now let us take a moment together to hold the sorrows we've heard. Let us feel compassion for those who are hurting. Let us remember to reach out with a kind word and a helping hand. Now I light one candle as a beacon of care for all the sorrows spoken and unspoken today. And now I ask you for all the joys you'd like to share. Type them in the chat box and I will read those aloud. Okay, let's see, from Donald Bissix. My sister, Rachel's son, Matt, and his wife, Angie, welcomed a baby girl, Layla Rachel. Welcome, Layla. From Richard Savoda, to everyone, a candle of joy. Liz and I welcomed a new grandbaby, Isla Rose, into the world this week. We are thrilled and we can't wait to meet her. From Kathy, our son Dan's application for architect license has been approved. He has worked hard for this. Congratulations to Dan. From Florence Cordovano, joy for Girl Scout camp next week. Hooray! Candle of joy from Cheryl Ringen. Let's see, Lily bought a skateboard yesterday and is learning new tricks already. A candle from Lisa Wilson Wright. Candle of joy for Nathan enjoying his job and John and I getting a lot more quality time alone. Candle from Garen Boyd. Joy, I'm overjoyed to announce that I will be finalizing the purchase of a two-family home in Melrose. Congratulations, on Tuesday. It has been an exciting experience. I am very grateful and happy to have worked with a very talented Jeannie W. and Bill Butler Group at Leading Edge Realty throughout the home buying process. My family and I love this community and are very excited for what lies ahead. A candle of joy from Sunny and James to everyone. Joy for James being able to help his mother complete her taxes this weekend. Hooray. From Carrie Mann, joy, looking forward to seeing my friend Mac McBurney, who is doing very well in his battle with leukemia. A candle from Angela Krause. You've made my dream come true, a UU service focusing on Native American wisdom. That is Robin Kimberer's Just Wow gratitude. A candle from Chris Ringen. Chris gets his second vaccine this week, also very good news. And I'll pause a moment in case anybody else is still typing. Okay, candle of joy. Please join me this morning in the spirit of prayer. I offer this prayer by the Reverend Sarah Eileen Lawal, our minister in Boise, Idaho. In the silence, Spirit of life and love, in the silence, in the stillness, we hear the call of our own heart, its tender dreams, its sorrows and triumphs. In the silence, in the stillness, we hear whispers of days gone by, of dreams still becoming, the promise of the future we celebrate together, our individual journeys and dreams, and our collective ones, knowing the journey is so much richer with others to share it. In the name of all that is holy, we pray. Amen. And Josh, if you could spotlight Liz next.
Now is the time for our offertory. I invite you to join me in pledging a contribution to support the work of our church. You may also make a donation using the orange button in the top right corner of our homepage at melroseuu.org. Half of our plate or non-pledge contributions this month will go to our Giving Beyond Our Walls partner, Green Roots Chelsea, selected by the Green Sanctuary Committee. Green Roots Chelsea is celebrating 25 years fighting for social and environmental justice in their community through engagement and empowerment, supporting youth leadership and innovative projects and campaigns. During our pandemic lockdown, many of us have sought solace in the wisdom and healing power of nature. For the offertory, we'll watch a short video of our photo submissions on that theme. Josh, please share the offertory video. In her book, Braiding Sweetgrass, Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and Teachings of Plants, Robin Wall Kimmerer says, being naturalized to a place means to live as if this is the land that feeds you, as if these are the streams from which you drink, that build your body and fill your spirit. To become naturalized is to know that your ancestors lie in this ground. Here you will give your gifts and meet your responsibilities. To become naturalized is to live as if your children's future matters, to take care of the land as if our lives and the lives of all of our relatives depend on it. Because they do. The earth has shared generously her gifts with us, air, food, water. But in return, we ask, what does the earth ask of us? We'll listen to Robin Wall Kimmerer's talk, Questions for a Resilient Future. What does the earth ask of us? Josh, please cue the video.
We are showered every day with gifts of the earth. Just this morning, as we awoke, we had air to breathe, food to eat, water to drink, the company of sycamores and sparrows and clouds. And yet, we find ourselves harnessed to an economy that relentlessly asks, what more can we take from the earth? This worldview of unbridled exploitation is to me the greatest threat that we face. Even our definitions of sustainability revolve around finding the formula so that we can keep on taking far into the future. But it hasn't always been that way. In the indigenous worldview, it's understood that the work of a human is to discover the answer to the question, what does the earth ask of us? And I really like to think about how does she ask us? She asks us by modeling generosity, for sure. She asks us through the consequences of our failures and through the many examples of our non-human teachers, helping us imagine how it is that we might live. Now this summer, just a few miles up the Hudson from here, I sat watching the sunrise over the river next to a flotilla of nearly 200 canoes and kayaks that were beached for the night. And as I watched the light come over the water, a head poked up and moved directly toward me. When she hit the shallows, her shell rose out of the water, and she came toward me on powerful legs and looked me right in the eye, as if she wanted to ask me something. And why not? She and I, we go back a long time to a story we both remember, part of the creation story told by the first peoples of this place. In the beginning, there was the sky world, where people lived alongside the great tree of life, on whose branches grew all the seeds, medicines, fruits, all the gifts of the plants on a single tree. But one day a great wind came along and felled the tree, and a hole opened where the roots had been. And a beautiful young woman, called in our language Gijkokwe, the sky woman, when she ventured to the edge to look down, she lost her footing. And then when she reached to break her fall, she grabbed a branch from the tree of life. And she fell like a maple seed pirouetting on an autumn breeze. A column of light streamed from the hole in the sky world, marking her path where only darkness had been before. But in that emptiness, there were many. They saw there a small object, a mere dust mote in the beam. And as it grew closer, they could see that it was a woman, arms outstretched, her long black hair billowing behind her as she spiraled toward them. And the geese all nodded at one another. They rose as one from the water in a wave of goose music. And she felt the beat of their wings as they flew beneath and broke her fall. Far from the only home she had ever known, she caught her breath at the embrace of feathers. And so it began. From the beginning of time, we are told that the very first encounter between humans and other beings of the earth was marked by care, by responsibility, borne on the strong wings of geese. And the world at that time was covered entirely by water. And of course, the geese could not hold the woman forever. So they called a council of all of the beings to decide what to do. And as Turtle floated in the water gathering, he offered to let her rest upon his back. And the others understood that she needed land. The deep divers among them had heard of mud down at the bottom of the water. They agreed to go get some. And one by one, the animals offered their help. The otter, the loon, the sturgeon, the beaver. But the depth, the darkness, and the pressures were too great even for these strongest of swimmers, who came up gasping and their heads ringing, until only the little muskrat was left, the weakest diver of all. And he volunteered to go, while the others looked on doubtfully. His small legs flailed as he worked his way downward. He was gone a very long time. They waited and waited, fearing the worst for their relative, until a stream of bubbles arose, and the small, limp body of the muskrat floated upward. But the others noticed that in his paw was tightly clenched, and when they opened his paw, there was a small handful of mud. And Turtle said, "Here, spread this mud across my back, and I will hold it for her." And Sky Woman did as Turtle asked, and then she began to sing. She sang a song of gratitude, and then she began to dance in a circle around the back of the turtle. As her feet caressed the earth, the land grew and grew from that mud on Turtle's back. And then from the branch in her hand, she seeded the earth with green. And so the earth was made. Not by one alone, but from the alchemy of two essential elements, gratitude and reciprocity. Together they formed what we know today as Turtle Island. In this creation story, the earth is made of gifts and gratitude, and perhaps that is what the earth continues to ask of us today, gratitude for all that we have been given. Now, gratitude may seem like weak tea, given the desperate challenges that lie before us, but it is powerful medicine, more than a simple thank you. Gratitude pulls us into relationship with other entities, reminding us that our very existence relies on the gifts of others. Gratitude calls us to acknowledge the personhood of all beings, from maple trees to snapping turtles. And gratitude is humbling. It's an antidote to the arrogance of our time. It reminds us that we are just one member of the democracy of species. It reminds us that the earth does not belong to us. Indigenous story traditions are full of cautionary tales about the failure of gratitude. When people forget to honor the gift, the consequences are always material as well as spiritual. The spring dries up, the corn doesn't grow, the animals do not return to those who have neglected gratitude. But the Western storytelling tradition is strangely silent on this matter. And so we find ourselves in an era where we are rightly afraid of the climate that we have created. The next step in our cultural evolution, if we are to persist as a species on this generous planet, is to take to heart Sky Woman's first lesson and be living expressions of gratitude to the earth. Now, each summer, I teach at a remote wilderness field station up in the Adirondacks, in a community of about 100 scientists and students, where it's abundantly clear that the land and other species are our source of knowledge. We may think we're learning about them, but in fact, we are learning from them. And one of our very best teachers returns every summer, just after the summer solstice, clambering her way up a steep bluff from the lake, under cover of darkness to lay her eggs in the warm, open sand of our volleyball court. With powerful bear-like paws, she flings the sand aside, digging furiously. Her sharp, snouted mouth open, she gasps for breath, rests for a minute, and digs some more with fierce maternal commitment and utter disregard for the students who surround her, snapping photos as eggs like leathery ping-pong balls leave her body. When she has covered them all back safely, she entrusts them to the earth and makes her way back to the water. And as predictable as the solstice, she comes every year. We know her by the little notch marked at the edge of her shell. Now, there is a lot of sand on our lake, hundreds of good places for a snapping turtle nest, but for some reason, this one chooses to bring her offspring to us. Our students are thrilled, of course, to be witnesses. It's a highlight of their field biology summer, but they also want to play volleyball. So the herpetology class carefully unearths the eggs and with loving care take the eggs to another site that they have prepared and measured to be sure it's a good place to incubate. It's full of warm sand, safe from predators, so that the snappers will hatch. Now this year, on the very next day, there was another mother in just the same spot. And that had never happened before. The next day, there was another. And another. One day there were two, one of them basking right on the welcome mat of camp headquarters. In all, more than a dozen snapping turtles came among us in as many days. It was a deluge of turtles. And as scientists, we are asking why. Why did all these turtles come to us in unprecedented numbers? And when our students went to find suitable transplant sites for the repeated batches of new eggs, they found one answer. The usual sand spits were underwater. Students wandered around with thermometers trying in vain to find good places. The exposed sandy banks, which were usually dry and warm, were now cold and wet. Unusually heavy rains this year had flooded the usual nest sites, and as the lake level rose, they had to seek out higher ground. The snapping turtles and their children had become climate refugees. But here's the thing that haunts me. There are a lot of sandy places on our lake. Why our wholly artificial rectangle of sand? Why would reclusive, solitary beings struggle up a rocky bluff and walk into a community of 100 scientists? Why did they come to us to do their most important thing? Not hidden, not covert, but as if demanding to be the center of attention. And shouldn't we be paying attention when the turtles head for high ground and wander among us in a kind of desperation? When at their most vulnerable, they come to us? There are many ways to ask why and many ways to answer. Science as one way of knowing, armed with models to predict the coming changes and thermometers to seek out refuges, is a powerful tool for addressing climate change, but not the only one. Which is why a scientist stands here before you, yes, listening to the indisputable data, and yes, listening to a message carried by snapping turtles. The ones who carry the earth upon their back, walking into our midst with a message that we reach to understand. I think the earth asks more of us than gratitude. The earth asks that we give our gifts in return so that the world can continue. This is the message carried by those turtles. They're asking us to remember that covenant of reciprocity. They're asking us to honor an agreement that at the beginning of the world, they were our life raft. So much closer to the end, we must be theirs. Turtles among us. How do we respond to the urgency when we sit at a tipping point on climate, when our plant and animal relatives are disappearing? It can no longer be business as usual. It's no longer a matter of small acts of stewardship, not enough to tenderly move eggs from one place to another when there are no more places for them to go. It's not enough to write praise songs for turtles, not enough to study the hormones that turn all the eggs to males when the temperature rises, not enough to write a regulation to manage lake levels. The earth asks us to use our considerable gifts in return for all that we have taken. We need a movement made of equal parts of outrage and compassion. We need voices raised in a mighty shout on behalf of Turtle Island. And so it is. On the banks of the Hudson, another turtle walked from the water, looked at the resting canoes, looked at me, and nodded. Some of those canoes began their journey in a small creek in the territory of the Onondaga, where the story of Sky Woman is also remembered. But the Onondaga were not paddling alone. We paddled in two distinctive lines, one of indigenous paddlers and one of allies. We paddled in two rows to commemorate the 400th anniversary of the two-row wampum, a treaty document whose beads recount an agreement between the original peoples and the newcomers of how we should live together, sharing the river of life, some in canoes and some in ships. It is an agreement to respect one another's sovereignty while caring for the gifts of the earth. It's an agreement that both peoples here on Turtle Island will protect the river of life. But our leaders have not honored that agreement, neither to the treaties nor to the earth. And so this summer, hundreds of people set aside business as usual to join an epic journey, paddling hundreds of miles from Onondaga to carry the message and the wampum all the way to the United Nations. We were met by thousands along the shore who also set aside business as usual to stand up for the river of life. If our leaders don't lead, then we have to. If all our leaders ask is that we are quietly complicit to destruction, we say, we are a better species than that. All over Turtle Island, people are rising up to reclaim their roles as caregivers for the earth, to be more than consumers, to be givers. We humans carry gifts of our own. We are scientists and storytellers. We are change makers. We are earth shapers riding on the back of the turtle. If the leaders don't lead, we have to join together, paddle against the wind, paddle against the tide, singing our hearts out. This is what the earth asks of us, that when the turtles come among us, asking for help, that we humans remember the covenant of reciprocity, seeking what Onondaga clan mother Audrey Shenandoah called justice not only for ourselves, but justice for all of creation. Miigwech, meet you.
Our closing hymn today is Blue Boat Home, number 1064 from our teal hymnal. Josh, please share the hymn video.
Please join me in singing our closing hymn, Blue Boat Home. Oh, below me I feel no motion, standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling ocean. Still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now, never harbor nor port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. Sun my sail and moon my rudder, as I ply the starry sea. casting questions into the deep, drifting here with my ship's companions, all we kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the lights of the heavens in our beautiful blue boat home. I give thanks to the waves upholding me, and the great winds urging me on. Greet the infinite sea before me, sing the sky my sailor's song. I was born upon the fathoms, never harbor or port have I known. The wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home.
From Braiding Sweetgrass, Professor Wall Kimmerer writes, knowing that you love the earth changes you, activates you to defend and protect and celebrate. But when you feel that the earth loves you in return, that feeling transforms the relationship, a one-way street, into a sacred bond.